We're not getting any younger.
Hmm.
What would be your response to that?
Okay. So the first thing I would think is that whenever a major life change occurs, it's a good time to take stock of what's important to you, where your values are, what your priorities are. Has anything changed? So, like, if you take a look at like 10 core life priorities, let's say career, communication, entertainment, finances, growth, health, relationships, safety, sex, spirituality, like 10 core things that apply to you. And we rank those in order 1 to 10. And we figure out what's most important to us right now. Is that the same as what was important to us before this major life change? Like, what's changed? What do we need to now reorder and make new decisions around?
What's up, y'all? So, look, let me just go ahead and keep it short with you. Did you know that as of 2024, the United States has a literacy problem? 21% of adults cannot read, and 54% of them have been recorded and it has been documented read below a sixth grade level. That is a catastrophe. But that's where I step in. Now, I'm not going to teach the grown folks how to read and write. However, PSA, the Ghostwriting Solution, has now a new package. It's called the Literacy Liftoff, and it caters to 9th through 12th graders who struggle with reading, writing, and comprehension. This new tutoring service will offer vocabulary skills, teaching students how to literally write from the bottom, literally teaching them how to do an introduction paragraph, how to do a hook, how to do a conclusion, how to add a little razzle dazzle, and how to add their own personal touch to it. Okay. Now, you know what you're saying. Well, Izzy, that's what they go to school for. Absolutely. But as an ex-teacher, the teachers just don't have time. So this program has 3 different packages from 3 different sets of hours that you can take. So if you're an AP, a principal, the student who needs help, the parent of the student, or you just know somebody who needs the help. If you're in the Houston area, you can get in-person tutorials. But if you are not in Houston, there are also virtual options offered as well. So hit me up at my email, theprodigyperspective@gmail.com and or psathepodcast.com, and we will hook you up. And just like that, we're back for another episode of PSA, the Mental Health Podcast, Season 9. I'm going to keep saying that. I can't believe I've been here for 9 seasons here, and we're still not at 10. Still not there, and that's okay. We're at 9. So I'm not going to lie to y'all. If I start sweating, don't talk about me because I don't have my fat boy rag with me right now. I don't know where it is. But if I start sweating, don't judge me because I think my air is out. Crazy. Crazy. Anyway, today's episode is going to be a great one for quite a few reasons. Now, throughout the years with the podcast, I've kind of strayed away from like relationship conversations. I've touched on them a little bit, but I've kind of been in and out. But I just think that where we are now and where I am in my life now is like those conversations are much more popular, especially since, like I said, y'all, when we started this, the youngest millennial was what? Granted, I didn't necessarily specify millennials, but when I first started this podcast, I was 23. So at that time, the youngest millennial was 21. The youngest millennial in 2025 turns 29. And now I'm going to turn 31 this year. So, yeah, we got a lot of stuff we got to cover, but good news, we got somebody for that. But before we get into that, I want to get into this week's meme because, let's get into the meme. The meme reads, the relationship you are looking for first starts with you being in tune with God, then yourself shortly after. Inspirations actually for this week come from not too many places. So the first one comes from, shout out to the boys at the podcast Hardly Initiated. They have their sister series Hardly in Love. And as y'all know, I was on Hardly in Love doing a single shout out. And boy, when I tell you my DMs was popping. So shout out to them for that. And shout out to them for that. And also what sparked this episode and another surprise that I'll reveal at the end was with my homeboy who was on my podcast, who you'll see again shortly. And I'll save that for the end of the rest because I don't want to. If I tell it now, I'm gonna spoil it. So I don't want to do that. So let's first jump into the first segment for today, which is y'all's favorite happy hour. Now let's get to talking in this happy hour because I got a few things to talk about. So let's get into today's topic. First topic: fashion. Where is it today? All over the place, but in a good way. Now, when I was on Harley Initiate or Harley in Love, it was interesting seeing so many live comments from people who didn't know you at once. And shout out to Tyshawn. He was just like, you definitely can dress. I see that. And somebody had made a comment and was like, his I don't think he found his style, his fashion is all over the place. You're a liar. I am Mr. Put It On, and everybody knows that. But I also had to take into account she was a lot older. So things are different. But for us young millennials, the question I hear a lot is, where do you shop at the most? So for me, everyone knows if I want to get something quick and something that's good quality, I go to Boohoo Man. I go to Fashion Nova, man. Theirs is decent. I don't shop at Sheen. You know what happened last season, why I don't mess with Sheen. And Sheen, I hope you hear this and I hope somebody sends it to you because I don't mess with y'all after how y'all handled that package that was missing. So I'm standing on that. It's forget you for life. I mean that. I mean it. But also, I think that too, like the shirt I have on now is from Hypeland, black anime hat right now. Robel flyer with my alma mater on it, Texas Southern. So, I'm just trying to do some things. You're not gonna see what I got on at the bottom because it don't matter. You can't see it nowhere, and I'm not standing up. So that's stupid. But if I'm in the studio, you'll get the full fit. At the house, this is what you're gonna get. It's COVID all up. I can't say that word. It's the pandemic. I can't say that either. It's the panoramic all over again. You see me dressed up top, you won't see the bottom. That's just how it is, right? So that's how it is. But my tip for anybody who wants to get into that, don't be afraid to shop at different places, especially I know men like, especially for us bigger fellas. So, definitely the Old Navy's still got some stuff, the Macy's, the JC Penney's, because it don't even some Walmart has some things. The thing is, it doesn't matter where you shop it as long as you know how to wear it. I've seen people with some of the cheapest fits that look better than the whole room, and people with designer everything. They got everything off the Saks mannequin. I'm not shaming Saks. I'm just saying it looks like they went into Saks Fifth Avenue, said, "Give me the entire mannequin." And then they just said, okay, I'm stylish, but you didn't take any effort. You just said, here, let me just do that. So keep that in mind. All right, y'all. So now you need to be fresh in case you run into your wife. Because what if you run into your wife and you look a mess? It could be like a nice story, like when later down the line, like when I first met him, he looked terrible. But why have to go through that if you don't have to? But nonetheless, you all, I have a great guest today as we're talking about relationships and shifting and all that good stuff. He's written a book that you all need to go and get if you haven't gotten it already. And he has a lot of wisdom, I believe he's going to drop today. So let me go ahead and introduce my guest for the day. My guy, what is going on?
Izzy, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So now, obviously, I can see your name, but for my audio people, make sure on YouTube you like, share, and subscribe. Can you tell the people what's your name, where you from, and where do you live now?
Sure. My name is Nick Brancato. I'm from Jersey City, New Jersey, and I live in Las Vegas, Nevada now.
Okay. Okay. So tell the people what it is that you do. Like, what is it that Nick, I do this? What is it?
Right. So right now, my current focus is being a personal development coach, where I help people achieve their goals more efficiently, and also doing relationship coaching, where I help couples connect better.
Okay. Now, what inspired you to get into relationship coaching?
Okay, so I started out as a high school teacher. I used to teach high school, and I used to teach adults at night, and I got a master's in education. And so I was always very interested in how people learn and helping people grow. And so I started working for the World Poker Tour boot camp, teaching education around the country. And believe it or not, poker is life. And a lot of poker is about the mental game of poker, the mindset that you take. And so, in order to have a clear head to play at the tables like 12, 14 hours a day, you really need to make sure your relationships are in order. So, along with poker coaching, I did a lot of relationship coaching as well. And so that's how I kind of got into it. I was doing that for the World Poker Tour for about 10 years. And then I started doing coaching more specifically for personal development more full time.
I hear a lot of stuff about poker. I keep hearing, I don't know if this is the sign I need to learn how to play. I know a lady, she's actually somebody you would never think that's actually into poker and good at it. And she talked about how it was one of the only things that kept her interest. And she was just like, it's not too many people like her in the industry. And just, I heard a lot of good stuff about poker. And I know she lived in Vegas for a little while too. Now, relationship coaching, you being into the mind, being into people. Now, you said you're a high school teacher. What did you teach? I'm an ex-teacher as well. So what did you teach in high school?
I taught computers, web development, and graphic design.
Okay. Yeah, 1 year I did teach technology as well for
Yeah.
middle school. Yeah, I did that one. Actually, my last year in education, going from teaching the tested subjects to teaching technology was a breeze. Now, you've written some books, and one of the most notable ones is Prioritize Us. So, what was the personal journey that led up to you to focus on this relationship strategy and to even write this?
So for Prioritize Us, it was really a crisis that led to clarity. So it was born during like a deeply personal and challenging time in my life where my now wife, was experiencing some serious mental health issues. And for years we didn't know what was happening. It was sporadic, but she was experiencing like hallucinations, voices, paranoia, and the causes were unclear. It has a happy ending. She was eventually diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, and she's on the right meds now, and she's doing amazing. But despite the severity of the situation, our relationship actually improved during the crisis. We used to have like a lot of miscommunications and struggles. And once her health became a priority, we prioritized health for both of us and safety. And once once we had the same top priorities, they sort of aligned, and our miscommunication sort of fell to the wayside, because I noticed that when we had our priorities aligned, it was much easier to communicate. And so I took that, and instead of just having the top priorities, we expanded it to like 10 life core priorities. And we ranked those. And then I came up with this system called the total difference score, where we take the difference from one person's ranking to the other, and it gives you a total score. And that lets you know how aligned you are or not in your priorities. And it shows you where areas of conflict are likely to occur, and also where your strengths are, like where your pillars of your relationship.
Okay. Okay, a lot of good stuff there. So, of course, I say that a lot of times it's the negatives that lead to the positives. In these situations, we're like, why me? Why me? And you're on the other side of it, folks. So, congratulations to you for that, as well as it's like we have to go through those things so that we can be the voice for somebody else who may have to go through that. And now to be a hordes of people who hear these stories and know that they can come out on the other side, because I knew somebody whose mother was schizophrenic, and a lot of people don't even know how to deal with that. So you in a space where you're married to someone who has this, and for you all to be in the best place ever, that's good news for somebody.
It really is.
So you worked in obviously tech, you worked in education, you're now in the relationships, you're writing books, you're doing all these wonderful things. Now, what is your take on? I didn't really hear you say, and I know it's gonna bring it out of you. What is your take on decision making, especially when it comes to relationships? And what do you think it is that people are missing?
Okay, that's awesome. I'm glad you asked that, because when I taught poker, poker's all about decision making under uncertainty. And so you have limited information to work with, and you've got to make a decision without that much time to act. And that's what the game is basically. It's keeping your information secret while trying to learn as much as you can about your opponents. And so decision making is paramount, I think, to relationships, because everything about love, I think, everything about caring for another person is about daily decisions, and making a decision every day that it's going to be about that person as one of your top priorities. throughout the day. So there's those kind of big decisions. And then there's the little decisions every day that some might be routine and are habits that you build over time. And some might be decisions you actually literally have to make that you're very conscious of having to make, of what you're going to prioritize. And hopefully you're doing that very deliberately. My goal whenever I'm working with anyone and coaching them is for their actions to be in alignment with their intentions. So often people say that they prioritize one thing, but they spend all their time doing something else.
Okay. I like that. So they enter one thing as prioritize their time doing something else. I think that's where a lot of men are right now, because a lot of them, here's the thing, which I'm sure you know, you're a man, you're happily married, but but for younger millennial men, like I said, we said the youngest is now 29. We're at that age where it's like, if I'm not married, or in some cases they've been married before, or it's like, I had one homeboy, I had one friend, yeah, he was in a committed relationship all his 20s, and he's now 31 and single, like engaged and everything. So I know that's just a big like culture like shock almost for him, because it's like, this is somebody I knew I was going to marry, we lived together, we were engaged. I believe
Wow.
they won't get back together, but still right now it's just like, what do you do? And even now, for the people who haven't been married, who are thinking like, well, I'm 29, 30. I'm not married, haven't been married yet, no kids. It's the end of the world. Oh my God, I'm never going to get married. Oh my God, oh my God. And then it's the other ones who are like, I'm going to just wife up somebody because I'm not, I've heard it all the time. So you heard it. We're not getting any younger. What would be your response to that?
Okay. So the first thing I would think is that whenever a major life change occurs, it's a good time to take stock of what's important to you, where your values are, what your priorities are. Has anything changed? So, like, if you take a look at like 10 core life priorities, let's say career, communication, entertainment, finances, growth, health, relationships, safety, sex, spirituality, like 10 core things that apply to you. And we rank those in order 1 to 10. And we figure out what's most important to us right now. Is that the same as what was important to us before this major life change? Like, what's changed? What do we need to now reorder and make new decisions around? Because what you don't want to do is stick with your old patterns and your old decision making framework when a major
Right.
life occurrence happens.
Okay. Like I said, y'all, we're not even 20 minutes in and we getting the gems already. I love it. Okay. Now, I have a few words a few words and phrases, and I want you to tell me the first thing that comes to mind, and there is no right or wrong answer. Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. The first one is priority drift,
The first word that comes to mind, pay attention.
relationship alignment,
Crucial.
lust versus love.
Mm. The big decision.
This one I thought was interesting, and it'll come up later. Fear of missing out in dating.
Oh, I'd have to go with paranoia.
I like that. So obviously, the definition of priority drift is the gradual misalignment of a couple's priorities due to life distractions, career, social media, kids, causing emotional distance. Relationship alignment, when both partners' values, goals, and daily actions are in sync, leading to healthy, fulfilling relationship. Lust versus love, recognizing the difference between physical attraction and a deeper emotional connection. And then fear of missing out, FOMO, in dating, the tendency to hesitate in commitment due to the belief that a better option might exist. Yikes.
Wow. Yeah.
All right, so now let's transition to the next segment here, because this is the mental health podcast. So let's break it down to, what does this have to do with mental health? Now, before we get into that, now you briefly discussed the TDS, the total difference score. So you developed this framework. I love a good framework. So how does it help men assess if they're making the right relationship choices?
Okay. So the way it helps men assess if they're making the right relationship choices is by getting at the underlying issues, the things that are actually most important, and taking you away from surface level subjective opinions and get to something data driven where it's actually objective and you could look at it on paper and say this is a fact. So if you're interested in having a relationship with someone, or you already are, if you know what their priorities are on 1 to 10, you can see where you're likely to have conflict occur, because the bigger the difference between your priorities, like if I have it ranked 1 and you have it ranked 10, that's a difference of a 9. When a difference is that big, it's going to cause conflict in the relationship if you don't preempt it.
Okay. Okay. Now, another question. What are the most common mistakes men make when choosing a partner?
The most common mistakes men make when choosing a partner would have to be basing everything initially on looks and having a quote type. I think a lot of men get caught up in the idea of they want this particular type of person, and it's a list of adjectives that make up someone, what they look like mostly, instead of something deeper that's actually going to build a sustainable, mutually beneficial, lasting relationship instead of just a superficial one. So that's definitely the biggest mistake men make.
I agree. I think I saw something and it says something to the extent of we actually weren't meant to have types. And the issue is when we get out here, because it was like I actually saw it from of all people, Dr. Umar Johnson and then Anton Daniels, and they were saying that we actually are supposed to get married young, because what happens is when we get out here and doing all this dating and having all this sexual intercourse with everybody, you didn't develop the type. And so now and which is funny because you hear people say, oh, well, I have a type, but I know that type isn't good for me, because you didn't been out here experimenting with any and everybody. And now it's like this soul tie you didn't make connect that you've been connected to, where it's like it has to be like this, and when it's not like that, and when God sends your spouse and it's drastically different than what you thought ever wanted, you thinking you going through it. How does this pertain to mental health? So I have a few different sources. So the first one is relationship satisfaction directly impacts mental health. According to the Wiley Blackwell Encyclopedia of Health, Illness, Behavior, and Society, individuals satisfying well-aligned relationships experience lower stress, reduced depression, overall improved mental health. But on the flip side, toxic relationships and breakups are strongly linked to anxiety, emotional distress, and even physical health deterioration over time. Choosing the right partner isn't an emotional decision. It has long-term psychological and physical consequences that can shape overall well-being. I had another friend. He was in a relationship. He's in a much better one now. I gotta add, he was in a relationship, and every time I see him, he just looked like he was about to cry. Every single time I saw him. Have you had clients that look like that?
Absolutely.
So how do you deal with them?
So the first thing is to see if you can get them to open up about what's really going on, because it's something very deep when they're looking like that all the time and not just as a one-off. So when it's consistent behavior, I want to try to get at the core issue. So I'll start digging, and usually it's about a relationship, often their primary relationship, like their spouse or whoever they're dating. And so what I want to try to find out is, what are the recent conflicts that have been going on, or where do you feel like you might be neglected? Because when you feel like you're missing out on something that you're entitled to, or that's fair, or that's equitable, you can really start to build resentment. And resentment is the thing that kills relationships more than anything, because it's like a cancer. It just eats away at you. So
I've seen, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, with the whole resentment thing, it is so many relationships you find out about, friendships even, that have resentment, and it eats away, and it's like you can hide it for a long time, but then finally it just rears its ugly head at the surface, and it comes out in jokes. It comes out in just the passive aggressive digs, and you just like, and in your mind, you're like, where is this coming from? But really, it's just coming to the surface. It's been there the whole time.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things in all relationships, friendships, romantic relationships, is someone who's actually rooting for you, and who's genuinely happy for your success, even if they're not a part of it. So I think one of the biggest red flags is someone who exhibits any kinds of signs of jealousy just because they weren't a part of your success instead of just rooting for you.
The second one is social support and relationships is crucial for mental well-being. So that transition well. According to McLean Hospital, Harvard Medical School, the importance of relationships and mental health, a strong support system within a relationship provides emotional stability, helps with coping during stressful life events, and improves overall resilience. When a romantic partner is responsive and validating, it enhances emotional regulation and mental clarity, reducing stress related mental health disorders. On the other hand, a lack of emotional support or toxic relationship dynamics can increase the risk of depression and anxiety, making relational alignment essential for psychological stability. Now, even with that, there are people, and I've said this before, and it sounds crazy, but there are people who you're in relationships with that don't like you. And
Yes.
sometimes it's because of things that you might have done, or maybe they are a little jealous of you. And we hate using the phrase, oh, they're jealous, oh, they're hating on me. But sometimes they are. And it sounds crazy because you'll think, why would somebody I love hate on me? But it's parents, it's kids, it's parents that hate their own kids.
Yes. So true.
You see it in the movies. You see it's just you just have to pay attention to the patterns. And I think that's one thing. And although, I might not have the best, the most, I have some obviously, the more romantic relationship experience. I just have relationship experience with people in general. And I know when somebody don't like me. Because the patterns never lie. Have you ever dealt with a couple where you might have done some digging and realized, I don't think you like her, I don't think she like him?
Yes. When you get to people's core, like when you know what's most important to them, what their top values are, what they value most, and what their highest priorities are, when some of those things don't align and they're so different, you can really identify where someone might dislike someone. So, for example, I was working with a couple once where spirituality was the top priority for one person, and the other person, it was their ninth priority out of 10. So
Oh
that's a
wow.
huge difference. That's a difference of eight. And unless they could come to some common ground on spirituality and how they spent their time, they weren't going to be able to work it out. And so they had to go their separate ways because the difference was just too great in such a core value for one of them. And it manifested itself like through communication and through what seemed like lack of quality time, like not attending a religious service or not spending time to pray or meditate and things like that. One partner doing it and the other person not wanting to participate, you can take that personally, and that's what was going on. And really, they just had different values.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely can see that. And I've heard about that a lot. Marital relationship quality affects physical and mental health. According to the National Library of Medicine, marriage and health, the quality of a relationship directly correlates with both mental and physical health. Researchers suggest that high quality marriages are linked to lower levels of chronic stress, reduced anxiety, and improved immune system function. Meanwhile, poor relationship quality and ongoing conflict increase the risk of mental health decline, higher blood pressure, and even mortality rates. This underscores why choosing a partner is wisely is not just about companionship, it's about a fundamental mental and physical health decision. Now, going back to the conversation about types, there are some people who are in a relationship where they like that toxic, we fight, we argue, but then we just have the most passionate, afterwards, and it's just, I love that rush, and it's just, I don't know what I'm getting today. What do you think that's rooted in?
I think a lot of the toxic relationship excitement is rooted in the need for adrenaline and also the need for uncertainty, lack of predictability. Some people do very bad with routine, and so if one part of their life is too stable, then they often look for chaos in another part of their life.
Wow. Okay. Some people get tired of routine. All right. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Now, watch this. What role does self awareness play in good relationship decisions?
Wow. If you don't know yourself, it's really difficult to take another person into account at all, because you're just guessing, and you're guessing at what another person is thinking and what they're doing when you don't even know what you're doing or why you're doing it. Because if you haven't taken the time to reflect and think about your own personal decision making, and you're just kind of living life on autopilot, it's going to be really hard for you to ever be in a healthy, functional relationship with somebody else.
Now we're going back to the comment about priority drift in relationships. So can you break down what this means and how it affects young men specifically?
Sure. So priority drift occurs when two people have their values aligned, and then over time things shift, sometimes suddenly, like a major life change, like a death or illness or birth or a job change, and but gradually over time is more common, where one person starts out focused on their career and another person is also focused on their career. Then something happens, maybe they have a baby, and then priorities shift to the family for one of the partners, but maybe not the other. So if you don't regularly check in about your priorities, you don't know when priority shift is going on, and you can't start to make better decisions. So the way this applies directly to young men is, I'd say, how they're spending their time. So much time is spent consuming content and on entertainment, and not focused on learning and growth, because you can consume content, but if it's growth focused like this podcast and high quality content like this, then it's okay. It's a good use of time because you're learning and you're growing. But when it's just mindless content, which is what most of the content out there is, we're in the golden age of content, but never before has been there been so much bad content too. Back in the day, the content was vetted. People had editors, the books were reviewed. It took a lot of people to work on a movie, a lot of people to work on a TV show. Now, a lot of people just put stuff out there without even fact checking. They don't do their homework like you do, getting the proper research and sharing it responsibly. So I want to
Yeah.
commend you for doing that, by the way. It's a real service.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I have a degree in English. So, someone tried to throw it was like we were like roasting back and forth. So it was funny. But I remember he made the joke. He said, well, I know you have a degree in English. He said, that's a lot of research. That means you're nosy. I was like, yeah, a little bit. Now, with that, I love all of that because, like I said, it's not about. I do believe there are times when you will be called to take a step back from consumer content, but in the same breath, it is about, I guess you could say, the 80-20 rule. Even with this, like if you consume the 20% of junk, cool, but the majority needs to be positivity, and unfortunately, most people don't do that. Older people talk about what we watch, but they binge watch the news. That is
Oh,
horrible.
horrible. It rots your brain. It's like they used to say to us when we were growing up, the TV is going to rot your brain, or the video games are going to rot your brain. But now they do it to themselves as they age. They just drift off into the news sometimes.
And there's so many old people who just like and they're gonna produce gloom and doom, and that's the purpose, and they just don't see that. Now we're gonna move to another segment really shortly, but as the precursor to that segment, I have a question, and feel free to share as much or as little as you would like. Have you ever made a relationship choice that you later realized was a mistake, and then what did you learn from
Wow. Okay, that's a great question. I've made a lot of relationship mistakes. Let's
it?
see. What did I learn from it? Okay. I'd have to say that when I first started out early on, as when I was younger, I used to compartmentalize everything and keep my worlds very separate. So I would have like work, and then I would have dating, and they would never intertwine, and I would have
Mhm.
family, and that would be a different world, and I'd live all these different lives and have sort of different personas in each of these worlds. And so what the mistake that I made was compartmentalizing and keeping my significant others out of other areas of my life. And I realized that while doing that, the two people are much more likely to grow apart unless you're very intentionally spending time coming together. It won't just happen naturally. You'll drift because you're living in different worlds, and there's always going to be other people coming into play and interfering. Now, what I learned to do is to integrate my life, and with my wife, we play a role in all areas of our life. We do our individual things separately. She works, I work, but we do come together in each other's fields to join forces and to make each other improve. Like, for example, she was the editor on my book and she did an amazing job. And I help her out. She runs a store and I help her out with the store all the time. And so we found ways to integrate into each other's life. It doesn't have to be that clear cut and that significant. But if you're not looking to integrate and you're keeping your world separate and compartmentalizing things, it's really hard to have a successful relationship if you're living separate lives.
That's interesting because a lot of times we think that, well, one thing I know, I have a friend who was like, she doesn't mix anybody. Like, we've never seen who she's dating, which is strange to me. But she's always on a date with the person, and like she won't even show a picture of them. It's kind of, to me, I get keeping it separate until it's like all the way legit. But sometimes people go, or sometimes people hide them because they're ugly and they're not slick. Sometimes people hide who they're dating because they're ugly, and that's fine. If you like ugly people, just say that, or just just say they might be physically challenged, but but seriously. A lot of times I think that people keep people away too because they're scared of what people are going to say, which then is rooted is you care what they think about you and what you're doing. But a lot of times you just have to realize people are going to say what they want anyway. That's just how people are. But I say all that to bring it around. I'll say I love mixing people. I do. I really do it. I mix friends all the time. Of course, not on every occasion, but I like when people can mingle with each other because then it's like when I don't feel like being bothered with y'all, here you go. But that's just how I look at it.
I mean, if you're surrounding yourself with people who make you better, who improve you, who help you grow, then letting them meet each other only fosters more positivity. But if you're surrounding yourself with people who aren't like that, then them meeting might cause conflict. So it's a good way to like do a self-check of like, why don't I want to introduce this person to someone else? Why don't I want to introduce my significant other to someone else? Or why don't I want to introduce these two friend groups or this friend to my family?
Exactly. Now, let's go to the next segment. All right, this is I Challenge That. In this segment, we're going to challenge some things. So be prepared for some questions that might, throw you off your rocker. But for right now, I have to ask, what are some red flags that a man is out of alignment with his relationship priorities?
Okay, some red flags that a man is out of alignment with his relationship priorities are not thinking about where you allocate your time. So, how much time do you spend on your career? How much time do you spend on entertainment? How much time do you spend on sex? How much time do you spend on relationships? If you don't know where those lie as priorities in your life, and you don't figure out what your time allotment is on them, you have no idea if you're actually living the life that you think that you are.
Okay. All right. Now, if he's repeatedly making these bad choices, like the same choice over and over again, what would be the first? I mean, I could say what would be the first step. The first step would be to acknowledge it, right? That would be the first step. So what would be the step after that?
After you acknowledge it, you want to find out why you're doing the behavior. So maybe you're seeking excitement, maybe you're seeking growth, but why are you doing the behavior? Let's get at the underlying root. So say someone is having a lot of sex with different partners or something like that. Okay, so they're being and they keep doing it. Well, maybe they're actually searching for their partner, but maybe they're fulfilling some basic need of sexual gratification. So they really need to discern between what they're getting out of this situation. So acknowledging the problem, then figuring out what the benefit is. If there is a benefit, is it even serving them, or does it just hurt them, the behavior? Because so often we habitually do things and it doesn't serve us anymore. Maybe it's part of an old pattern or part of an old priority. Like I know a lot of people who work a lot and they have just been working a lot for like as long as I've known them. And their life has changed, but they've never reprioritized. They just keep putting in 50-hour weeks like clockwork, even though their life has changed, even though there's been introduction of family or kids, or their health has taken a toll, and maybe they need to focus on themselves and getting healthy and make career a lower priority for now.
Hmm. It's all about priorities, and that's the main thing. We keep going back. That word is definitely popping up, and I'm sure it's going to pop up a few more times this episode. So I think, if nothing else, y'all don't learn anything else from this episode, is that you need to get your priorities in order. At this point, like I said, the youngest millennial is 29.
Wow.
What we doing? You know what I mean? Now, as this one, we're talking about relationships, obviously, but for people that aren't in one, but especially for the people that are, maybe you're in a terrible one. Maybe, hopefully, this episode is the realization, like, maybe I'm in something toxic, or maybe I'm in something I shouldn't be in, or something that I've gotten the signs God has shown me, leave this lady alone, but I just can't do it because she got some stuff that you just can't leave it alone. But that is going to be your downfall. I've seen it happen too many times. Great to my next question. Many young men don't realize that they're in making bad relationship choices and so they're deep in. So why do you think this happens so often?
So often men get deep in relationships and don't realize it because they're focusing on the wrong factors. To focus on the key decision making criteria that's going to make up a long-term partner is very different than what's going to make up a good date or a fun night or a good weekend or even a fun relationship. If you can't see how the relationship's going to be mutually beneficial and long-term sustainable, then it might not be a worthwhile endeavor in the first place. And so I think a lot of guys get in because of lust, like we touched on earlier. They're just attracted to a person physically, so they start spending time on them, and maybe they don't ever see the red flags that that person's not that interesting, or that they don't have a growth mindset, or that they're not actually supportive of them at all, or that they don't cheer them on. These things that really matter a lot in your day-to-day life, they don't take into account. They don't see the red flags, or maybe they're not looking for them.
Yeah, that's the funny part. They see the red flags, but you know what they say? Them red flags look like Six Flags, and now you think you at a carnival. So you didn't miss all the red. I got on red right now, but you didn't miss all the red flags, but you didn't see them. But you like, well, maybe if I just look down when this red flag pop up, I'm gonna just look down. I ain't even gonna pay attention because I want this. I need this. This is gonna help me get over. There's the lie that I hear people say. You want to get over somebody, get you somebody else. No, you getting another problem. Now you still dealing with the last problem and a new problem.
Yes, that's going from one relationship to another or multiple relationships simultaneously when you don't know what you want is just a recipe for disaster. It's not going to turn out well. You got to identify who you are, what your values are, and then what values you want in a partner, and then start looking for those instead of going on the superficial.
So now my next question is, and this is from the relationship expert. Well, not expert, but to somebody that might say, well, at this point, you're your last day and you that's your last day. Well, some of y'all on your last day in your 20s when you hear this. But should men even be thinking about long-term relationships in their 20s, or should they focus on themselves first?
That's a great question. At what point should you focus on yourself? And at what point should you focus on having a long-term relationship? Such a good question. So I think that adopting a mindset of long-term relationships is the one that's going to serve somebody best, even if it's not necessarily a long-term romantic relationship. If when you encounter people, you think, I'm going to know this person for a long time, let's approach this like it's going to be a win for both of us, and you look to have those kinds of people in your life, you can still work on self-development and growth. And then when the time is right, you're going to have a lot of very solid, good options because you're going to have a lot of friends and a lot of, maybe they're romantic, maybe they never were, but you're going to have a lot of people that you value in your life to choose from to be a potential life partner. Like my wife and I, we were friends for almost a decade before we ever got together.
See, here's the thing. Now, again, I'm not against people have a weird or not weird, but they have a misinterpretation of how I view marriage. Some people think that I'm against people being married young. I'm not against that. The issue I have is because I did have one group of friends or a couple that are still together. They got married young, they're still together. Love that for them. But the issue is a lot of people who got married young got married, I feel like, and now it's been proven for superficial reasons. And they didn't realize it because this generation has probably the most divorces before the age of 30. And so clearly, that statistic alone shows you that a lot of people shouldn't have gotten married young because a lot of people didn't know themselves all the way. And a lot of people just kind of their emotions got the best of them, and they just said, let's just get hitched and do this. And they probably feel like we're getting older and I need to have some kids, so let's go do this. So much so that we now are in the world where people will say, your first marriage is your trial marriage. I think that is the most toxic advice going around.
For
What
sure.
is your take on your first marriage being your trial marriage?
So the idea of a trial marriage is everything that could be wrong with dating and relationships, because a marriage is the idea of the premise of a marriage is that it's lifelong. And not only is it a commitment relationship wise between two people, but more importantly, it's a legal contract. You're basically giving half your life to this person. So the idea that you might do it temporarily is crazy to me. And it represents this sort of finite thinking that is reflective of people who are competitive and not cooperative. So when people are competitive, they're looking for short-term wins. So like, let me get the girl, but then what happens once you get her? Let me marry her, but what happens once you marry her? What about the future? When people are cooperative, they're looking to build something that's sustainable over time. And that's what you want in a life partner.
So the trial marriage is toxic. Like I said, I'm glad you agreed to that it is toxic. So let me ask you, do you believe that couples, especially if couples who are, faith-based Christians, believers, do you believe that they should get prenups?
Wow, the prenup question. So I think it comes down to your values between the two people. If you actually see your relationship as for life and you're making your good decisions in the first place, then a prenup shouldn't be necessary. But if you're on shaky ground and you're unsure about your decisions, you're unsure about your partner, you probably shouldn't be getting married in the first place. And that's when a prenup comes into play. It's usually somebody's uncertain and they're trying to protect themselves. So I understand it. It is a legal contract, but it's sort of the wrong premise to be operating from. Instead of having a mindset of this is for the long term, you have a mindset of what's my exit strategy. And anytime you're planning your exit strategy, that's like having a plan B. It's going to take away from plan A.
So then my question or my response, remember, this is the challenge that section. So my
Yeah.
response to that would be, well, what do you say? Mind you, I'm playing devil's advocate because I agree with you. But what would you say to somebody who says, well, you're marrying for love and all of that, but what if, something happens? What if things change? What if they come in and she just want all your money? Or, I'll let you go first as the expert and I'll give my take afterwards. But what is your response to someone saying that it's stupid to just marry just for love and that marriage is still a business?
So marriage is a legal contract. So I guess that means it's a business. But when you marry for love, that person that you love is also taking legal responsibility for you when you get married. They become your next of kin. That means that if something happens medically, they're going to be the one making decisions for you. And I don't think hardly anybody takes that into account when they're choosing a significant other, because that's something that I actually lived with my wife. Is like it's important that we're able to make medical decisions for each other. So because you never know what might happen. And most people don't take that into account. If you don't trust the person to make medical decisions for you, to make business decisions for you, because that's what might have to happen if you become sick or incapacitated, they're the ones who are going to step in. And so if you're not looking at your life partner under those variables in your decision-making process, you're really missing out on what marriage really is in totality and just looking at one aspect of it, which is the romantic relationship.
And that's the thing. A lot of these people will push, especially the red pill community, will, they'll say things like, well, you're going to get insurance on your house, or you're going to get insurance on your car. So why wouldn't you get a prenup and protect yourself? But like you just kind of stated, you're going into the relationship with the wrong mentality. You're going in there thinking like, well, in case this doesn't work out, like I love you now, but in case things don't work out, what happens then? But I'm a firm believer, and maybe people call me, oh, you just think this. I don't know what you'll say. But as I stated, and I made the joke, but it was very serious, the red flags were there from the beginning. You just ignored them. So if this person gets, when you see those people that were like, this person changed into somebody totally different, that person was there the whole time, and God allowed you to get glimpses of who they were. You chose to ignore it. And now I'm going to say that all the time.
I think there's so much truth in that, because so many people don't look at any underlying issues in the relationship. They don't even pay attention to what's core. I know people who have gotten married without even having the kids talk. People haven't had the career talk of who's going to work, who's going to stay home, how are we going to raise the kids, who's going to spend their time, where are they going to go to school, are they going to be homeschooled, what's going to go on. There's so many important issues that need to be discussed before you even consider marriage. So the idea that it's just about love is kind of silly, because it's about so much more than love. It's about that decision, like we talked about earlier, every day to be committed to that person and to be committed to a shared vision of a future.
Good stuff. Let's go to the next segment, the final segment for today, which is the weekly sabbatical. And in this segment, we're just kind of recapping some things and kind of just going over some things. So before I go into this, what one piece of advice would you give to your younger self in an old relationship?
Wow. I would tell my younger self to be more open, be less guarded, and you can't know how somebody really feels about you and what somebody really thinks about you unless you share who you really are. So being protected all the time. I'm an introvert by nature, so it might not seem like it here, but I am. And so I need my quiet time, but I'm very guarded. I was an only child, so I protect myself. And so I would tell my younger self to be more open, share, let people know who you are, and then pay attention to how they respond and what they say. Believe them if they say they're going to hurt you. Believe them if they say they might not be right for you.
It's funny because I'm only child as well, and I laugh because people hate only children. I don't know why they hate them so bad. They just hate only children. I don't know why, but it's so weird to me. All right, so now I'm gonna have a from a source. It's called Four Biblical Truths God Will Use to Lead You to the Right Person, and this is an article written by Mark Ballinger. So I'm going to go through a few parts of it, and we'll stop periodically just to kind of assess. So it says the first one, it says your life's mission influences your choice of partner. So it says the mission you pursue in life will naturally lead to your partner with individuals who share similar goals and values. If your mission is to glorify God, you'll be inclined to choose a partner who shares this commitment. This is highlighted in Ephesians 2:3-5. All of us lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our flesh and following its desires and thoughts. Like the rest, we were by nature deserving of wrath, but because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in his mercy, made us alive in Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It's by grace you have been saved. So just to reiterate that, I think that in short, that's the biblical version, but the main thing is choosing somebody who is aligned with you. And a lot of times I do believe opposites attract, but okay, so it's one thing, and this is the producer brain in me. So one thing I will always say when I brought groups together, even on vacations that I would create, I would say I would get excited when I said we finna have a good time, the group doesn't match. So now when the group doesn't match, it's going to be a great time. But the thing that we all have in common is we have a similar desire. especially back when I used to drink a lot, it would be like, we all know we about to get drunk. The group don't match, but we all have the same mindset here. We about to get drunk, right? So it's the same thing in a relationship. Y'all have to have the same goal, even if y'all don't look alike, act alike. But as long as we have the same goal. And what's your take on that before I move to the next one?
That verse is very powerful, especially the part about having a shared vision. And that goes back to what I was talking about, compartmentalization versus integration. If you're living separate lives and you're off doing one thing and you're off doing another, and I have one goal and this vision for my future, and you have another goal and a different vision for your future, how do those come together? Do they even work together? We have to have a shared vision for our future, or we're never going to get there. We're just going to let life happen instead of being proactive. Very powerful verse.
Yes, yes. And it's sad because so many people, even at this age, still aren't proactive. And it's like, and I'll say that this conversation for another episode, but it'll be when you have those friends where you just have to leave alone because it's like you don't get it. And I can't be, we spent the 20s together doing the same stuff. Now it's time to level up and you're not doing it. There's nothing I can do. The next one is commitment strengthens love. While love can inspire commitment, it is also true that commitment can deepen love. Engaging in marital commitments such as vows can fuel the love you have for your partner. Philippians 2:3-11 emphasize the importance of humility, valuing others, which are essential components of a committed relationship. I think that's a lot of the time too, that being committed is a decision in itself. We live in a world now where so many people are happily married in their open marriage or happily married in their polygamy. And it's like, I'm sorry, I hate to be that person. And I know I'm going to catch hell, and I hope I do on TikTok actually, but you are a polygamist because you lack discipline. That's all that is. So mutual sacrifice leads to fulfillment. Sacrificing your desires for your partner can lead to greater fulfillment in the relationship. Both individuals prioritize each other's needs. Embodying the principle found in Philippians 2:3, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility, value others above yourself. But see, that's the thing. People don't, and of course you can touch on this as well. A lot of times in relationships, people will be like, well, certain person couldn't be in a relationship because they don't put the other person first, or they don't put anybody first. But if you're in in alignment with the person, yeah, you'll put them first, but they'll put you first too. So it's like you'll both balance each other out.
Yes, absolutely. You complement each other instead of compete. And I think this goes back to what you mentioned earlier about personal growth and whether or not you're ready for marriage, like at what age. I think if you're not happy with yourself and where you're at with your personal growth, you're definitely not ready for marriage. And that could be at different ages for people, but it is probably later in life.
So what would you say to the person or the man who was like they were nothing before they met their wife, and their wife was the person who basically helped them become the man that they are today?
Well, I think when you're growth oriented and your significant other is, that's always going to be true. You want a significant other who helps mold you into the person you are today. I know my wife has made me a much better person in so many ways. But I had to be happy with myself and my personal growth before I could make that daily commitment to be a greater thing, to be a partnership together instead of just an individual.
Okay, good stuff. The final one. It says prioritizing God enhances your relationship. Placing God above your partner is the best way to love them fully. A strong relationship with God enables you to love others more deeply. Romans 5:5 illustrates, and hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out in our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. I think I'm learning with myself that loving not just who you're going to date, but also loving yourself really does come from a deeper understanding and relationship with God, especially for those people who struggle with self-love, who struggle with self-esteem, who struggle with self-worth. And I think it really requires you to really grow your relationship with God, to see yourself we can't fully see it, but see yourself some of the way he sees you. And that will help you with self-love, because everyone's all about self-love these days, but a lot of the self-love is a manual version where you do it in your own strength, and you only get so much done because you can only do so much in your own strength.
That's very interesting. It's like you have to put up a mirror to yourself to actually take that time to spend time alone with your spirituality and reflect and pray and meditate and get a sense of who you are before, and if you and learn to like yourself before you can even actually like someone else.
And also, let me throw out there too, sometimes your spouse doesn't like you because they don't like themselves. So
So true.
yeah, you might want to think about that, because that'd be an issue. It's a big issue as well. Sometimes people they don't like themselves. So yeah. All right. So now, as we end off, how can men start applying the principles and prioritize us to their daily lives right now?
Immediately, people can take a look and assess what's most important to them and look at how much time they're spending on each area and see if that's in alignment with what they're trying to achieve. Also, I would take a look at your how much effort you're putting forward into something and what your satisfaction is. So, if you look at your priorities in life, you just make a list. You can use the 10 that I have, or you can make a list of your own priorities. The exercise is just as valuable either way. And then say, how much effort am I putting toward this priority on a scale of 1 to 10? And what's my satisfaction on a scale of 1 to 10? If you do that on your priorities, you're going to see where you're aligned with yourself and where you're actually misaligned with yourself.
Okay. And also, as we end our final question, where can listeners connect with you and learn more about the total different score framework?
Listeners can connect with me on Instagram at personal dev coach or at nickbrancato.com, or they can get Prioritize Us on Amazon.
All right, good stuff. Let's move into the question and challenge for the week for the audience. I've been more consistent with this for season 9, y'all. What is your current relationship status? And then my next question, is that by choice? I want to know where your head is at, what you're thinking. Do you want to be in a relationship? If so, why? Why not? So yeah, that's something to think about. So thank you for this conversation today. Anything else you want to give to the people, share with them, final words, any of that?
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciated your time. I had a great time talking with you. And I want to let the listeners know that they're really on the right track listening to your podcast and being focused on personal growth. Keep doing that. Focus your content on areas that help you learn, not areas that just entertain.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. All right, y'all. So that's all we got for this week. Now, to end off, I wanted to tell y'all. So this was the surprise I was telling you about. One of my inspirations was from a friend of mine talking about he wants to come back on my podcast. Vari, you remember him from like 2 seasons ago. He was like, you should interview me and my fiance on your podcast. So at first I was like, but when I thought about it, I said, you know what? I think I got an idea. So starting next week, this was the introduction into the relationship series Reloaded. Now we did the relationship series in season 3 100 years ago, but we bringing it back and we're interviewing real couples, asking real raw questions from people who've been married 100 years to people who are just engaged, people who've been married 2-3 years, people who met after and were married after a year, still married. So it's a bunch of different dynamics, but I want to get the different views. So just so my audience can get the understanding that everyone's marriage doesn't look the same, but they all have the same goal. And so I want to shout out Nick for being the door opener to these conversations. And yeah, that's all I got. So tune in next week for the first episode in the relationship series Reloaded. PSA signing out. Always remember, keep your head up like your neck hurt. Remember who you are. Make your mind up. Don't let it make you. And as always, remember, I love us for real.